that Mark Pating from Nachi will be joining us today in our live session. He'll be talking about the work done at Nachi, as well as the impact of COVID-19 on translating and interpreting services. Eva will be asking a few questions today.
Good morning, Mark. All the way in Canberra, and I do know that you're coming to Melbourne this afternoon for a quick visit, our first one in about 12 months. So good morning to you.
Thank you, Eva. Thank you very much for having me. Yes, looking forward to this and looking forward to getting out and about for the first time in a very long time.
Yeah, airports are a bit strange at the moment, but hopefully the weather's good in Melbourne. You never know with us. We don't often roll it out the way that visitors expect it. But today we here to talk about Nachi. Can you just briefly tell us what Nachi does? I know that you've been the CEO for what, about 5 years now, maybe longer now?
That's right, 5.5 now.
Mm-hmm. What does that Nachi do? What's your remit and what's your job at Nachi? What have you achieved? What's there to do still?
Yeah, sure. Well, Nachi's been around now for 44 years, established back in 1977. It was established to support a wave of post-war migrants that didn't speak English settling in Australia, and it was important to have standards in place that made sure and gave confidence to people who needed an interpreter in particular, that interpreter had met some sort of standard, so that there was confidence in doing that. That is still very much part of our role, although the quality and standards have become more important in recent times. So Nachi is the national professional standards body and the certifying authority for people to work as a translator interpreter in Australia. So we issue certification to people who meet our requirements, and that usually involves passing a Nachi test in either translating or interpreting. Nachi is very unique by international standards. There are a few other certifying accreditation type bodies around the world, but none that have anywhere near the breadth of languages that Nachi covers. And of course, in Australia, the certification system also covers Australian Sign Language and a range of Australian Aboriginal languages, as well as all the migrant languages we have. So we are continuing on with that. There continues to be new migrants from different parts of the world and bringing with different languages coming to Australia. So that is an ongoing challenge for us to be able to develop and manage the testing and the certification system as those languages keep expanding, and we keep up to try to meet the needs of those people by maintaining a pool of certified people, certified interpreters and translators who can meet that demand.
So a company, an organization that's 44 years old would have to have gone through many changes, particularly recently with, the digital space. I mean, I've been aware of Nachi since 1993. So this is when I sat to my first paraprofessional translation test. But in the last 5 years, when you took the reins, I think one of the challenges, and I'm kind of watching it from the sidelines, of course, was to go digital. And I think during COVID, that became even a more urgent requirement. And you were saying to me before we came on air that you were kind of ready to do that. But what's changed in that space in terms of testing?
Yeah, certainly. Well, firstly, from an administrative point of view, we had thankfully embarked on a digital transformation strategy, and that was initially focused internally and just improving our own administration and workflow, because we had lots of manual processing and so forth. And so we had started that process. And we had made good progress, which is very lucky, because when the pandemic hit, we were in a position where most of our staff could work from home over a secure platform. We had digital capability by then, so we're able to still have meetings and keep people connected and engaged. And because we'd had an automatic workflow with most of the application process, we were still able to progress. But of course, in terms of delivering our business, we relied on people coming to our office for most of that. So for obvious reasons, that became became impossible. We were able to start by doing some of the interpreting tests over a video platform using Microsoft Teams, and that wasn't ideal, but it meant we could at least still provide some sort of service. But over the course of 2020, that work progressed rapidly, and like everyone else, become much more efficient in using Zoom and other technologies to meet. By the end of the year, we had all of our translation tests done completely in an online environment. And we are continuing to develop solutions for the potential to do more of interpreting tests online. At the moment, we can do some of that, or can we do some of it over video? But for the most part, we're hoping, at least for interpreting tests, we'll start to, so people we're now testing back in our office.
Okay, and you did mention the fact that you've expanded the languages that you do certification in. Once upon a time, that used to be 62, I think, from memory. How many languages do you cover now?
Yeah, so we're up near around 40 at the moment in terms of the new tests. We still, of course, issued credentials in a far greater number of languages. In terms of the new test format, up to approaching 40, and that continues to expand.
So we'll just have to watch that space. And with recertification, which is something that I think my certifications just come up. I need to do the paperwork. So it's been about 3 years, or nearly 4 years, that you've taken the industry on a journey of I don't know what you want to call it, but like renewal maybe is a good word. How has that been going?
Yeah, pretty good. And we call it sort of an ongoing journey of professionalisation of the sector, and that includes, mandating more training requirements before people can get to do the test, and then after they've been certified, to have that recertification requirement, which is essentially just continuing to keep working and engage in some minimum levels of ongoing professional development. Pleased to report that, and of course, this is another process that has been automated. So people now that get certified get access to their Nachi portal to record all their details, and the administrative process of recertification is fairly straightforward. As said, but the requirements are basically a minimum amount of work and a minimum amount of professional development. And that process is recorded through the portal and submitted online. And the feedback, thankfully, has been really good with the ease of that process, especially for hundreds or sometimes thousands of people who have not had to do it before. So we're quite pleased with that.
That's good to hear. I mean, I remember at one point, Nachi had something like 80,000 certifications. So that doesn't mean 80,000 people, because like someone like me might have 3 or whatever. So I think taking the entire industry on that journey, as you mentioned, that must have been quite a challenge in terms of technology as well, because I think regardless of the fact that I think Australia is quite advanced in terms of how certification happens and how the industry works generally, there were still sort of pockets that were not super responsive. So I think that journey is now kind of finished for Nachi, or still working on it? Yeah,
well, still working, and I think it's more important, I guess, for the profession to come on the journey. We've probably done our bit for now. We'll continue to sort of make improvements and changes to the test going forward to try and adapt. In fact, we're very soon, you'll hear in our next newsletter about our continuous improvement program. So we'll be reviewing, have some expertise to help us, but we'll be going back and reviewing the several thousand tests that have been done since the introduction of certification, and just having a look at those all those results, all the different tasks, and how the performance has been, and drilling down to see that we're confident that the tasks are a reliable indication of performance, and that the rubrics are adequately described and the examiners are applying them appropriately. So that review will continue over the next couple of years, but lots of work will start on that very soon. And that's just part of our, I guess, journey of continuous improvement.
And Mark, what you described sounds simple, but it isn't. I mean, no. I've been, it's such a complex process. There are so many moving parts and so many elements that you have to get right, and so many people that have to fit into that system. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit. Why should people work with Nachi certified translators and interpreters? When people ask you that, what do you say? Yeah,
well, I think it's really important. Ultimately, Nachi is there for the benefit of the consumers, or the people who rely on their professional practitioner. Whilst we obviously want to support the individual practitioners, our main aim is the importance of the consumer. And when someone has certification, a consumer or someone relying on the services of a translator or interpreter, having that certification means that they can have confidence that the professional working with them has had some formal training, have had their skills independently assessed through our test, are bound by the professional code of ethics, remain current in their practice, and engage in ongoing professional development. So it's about a sense of confidence that comes with the certification that people can feel much more assured.
There's a couple of points I usually add when I'm asked that. And one is that, first of all, jobs stay in Australia. You have people that understand the local context. So when it comes to translating information for the local communities, there's no one better placed. And I think the other thing is that many of my colleagues are very passionate and they truly care about what information gets into whom and how. And I think, that workforce that's out there has had lots of ups and downs during COVID. And one of the things I was hearing, Polaron doesn't do a lot of interpreting, but we were hearing from people that they had no work. And I think it was disappointing to hear that some of the work was going overseas and whatever. But what other impacts have you noticed on, during COVID, during the last 12 months on the industry?
Yeah, it was certainly a strange time at the beginning, and of course, many places and governments and services were not particularly prepared. But the biggest impact we had in terms of, apart from how it affected Nachi directly, but I think it's much more important how it affected the profession and the professional practitioners out there. Certainly, lots of people had indicated that because of the inability to be face-to-face or in contact with people, lots of people were not getting work, and that was a real problem, because what it actually meant was that lots of people who may have needed support in terms of an interpreter may not have been getting it. Thankfully, that started to get resolved better with vastly improved video-based interpreting technologies. And I think that will probably become a thing of the future as well. No doubt some interpreting will go back into a live face-to-face environment, but I've no doubt that it won't go back to the same level. And I think video-based interpreting will be around a much more common going forward nowadays. And that isn't automatically bad. It can be positive for some interpreters. It can mean they spend a lot less time in transit and may be able to do more assignments and more jobs in a day, but it is important that the remuneration for video-based interpreting is at least the same as face-to-face.
And that, of course, comes with its own set of challenges, like just being tired of being on Zoom all day long, or I remember when I worked as an interpreter, actively just that face-to-face personal contact helped me do my job better. So as we mentioned earlier, doing things online has many benefits, but one of them, and that is not having that face-to-face, ability to see things there and then, is not one of them. So I think the other thing that, our colleagues say, interpreters and translators, is that, there's that pressure of doing everything online. And that pressure is put onto the interpreters, of course, because they have to be the ones with equipment, and the prices are dropping as well. But I think, hopefully the industry will even out and catch up, I guess is the way I would put it. And what about translators? Have you noticed any impact on the translation sector?
Yeah, well, I think probably translating had already, machine translation has been around for a while. So on a, and this is sort of anecdotal evidence I get just talking to professionals, it seems that translators had been more on that path some time, and the digital transformation affecting the translation industry had already well progressed, and so most translators are experienced in using various types of CAT tools, and they're used to working remotely, at home or remotely anyway, because the nature of their work doesn't require that sort of interaction. So I think the impact was less on them, and in some ways probably they were more prepared for some of those changes, especially with digitisation.
Yeah, and again, Australia is really well placed. And you mentioned earlier on that we do speak, up to 300 different languages, or we able to use it. So I think one of the aims, I hope I'm right, or I think I'm right, of Nachi is to make Australia more of a hub where we can pretty much do any language combination eventually. Is that the dream? Is that the vision?
Yeah, sure. And as I mentioned before, Eva, we are very unique in terms of the breadth of languages, and because of that breadth, we also require different levels of certification, because for some languages, access to formal training and there are other challenges to make that really difficult. So we do have a sort of levels in there. But yeah, we want to be able to keep adapting and changing. Sometimes it's difficult to find that additional expertise, but essentially, our role is to respond to the needs of the Australian society. As that continues to get more diverse, we have to try and work to keep up with that.
And that's an interesting journey in itself, I think, and because a lot of translators, interpreters do work as freelancers. There are, some hospitals and other institutions where translators, interpreters may be on staff. But for the most part, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would say like 95% of practitioners are freelancers, people that work for themselves, people that work from home. Where does professional development come into it? And I know that Nachi has been doing a lot, but there's also an expectation of me as a practitioner to actually read journals, be across changes in the language, in my language pairs or whatever else. Where can people reach to additional professional development opportunities? So I know some universities do it. I know that AUSIT does some. Where else can people go?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eva. Just firstly, in the freelance type thing, our observation is that many more translators work more independently, and interpreters are more likely to work via an agency, but the nature of employment, whether it's casual or contracted, or like I said, some are on staff, varies a bit. But generally, we find translators work more independently and interpreters more through agencies in some way, shape, or form. And yes, there are ongoing professional development requirements, and we think that's important for people to keep up and maintain those skills. As I said, they're not onerous requirements, but we think important to keep there because it gives, as I said, the consumer more confidence. Where, in terms of where to get it, as you mentioned, AUSIT is a really key provider of professional development services for members and others. We like to think most agencies provide some for the people they engage as well, and that's important. And sometimes there are specialty type services, like, for example, some interpreters with specific training in working with people with dementia, or working with clients within the National Disability Insurance Scheme and things like that, and other places provide that. We keep on our website and our newsletter anyone that has any professional development available and going. We're happy to keep promoting and supporting that so people can get it. But it is important, we have the professional development catalogue to record PD, and some people think that is a list of specific activities, and it's definitely not. It's really up to the individual professional to understand their own needs and do what they think is best for them, and the category is really just a means of sort of recording, and there are broad headings in there that to use the thing that best close describes it. And in another couple of years, like everything, we'll review that again and look at more things to expand options and take feedback from the industry about that, because initially, there were thousands of practitioners that didn't have to do any, and so we wanted to make sure it was attainable and achievable. But going forward, we've had some feedback now, some people who are more qualified and experienced, that there's less available for them. So we will think about that as well. And we will work with the sector to try provide more of those opportunities. It's important because of Nachi's role as professional standards and sort of independent, that we don't provide that ourselves, because we shouldn't be getting money for that, but what we will do, we have helped and supported and subsidised and work with the sector to create more opportunity. So we'll continue to do that, and like I said, that'll involve reviewing the catalogue in a few years as well.
And Mark, I am an internal optimist, although I might not appear to be one. But when I reflect on my journey with Nachi, which, as I said, started in 1993, and the industry in general, there are lots of things that have changed, many things that have changed for the better. And I think your remit when you took on was to change lots of things that maybe didn't work in the industry. But what's ahead of you? What's planned for the next, say, 12 months at Nachi?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Eva. Yeah, when I started, I guess, some time ago, I took a little time to understand the sector, at least from how I thought I did. One of the first things I identified was how much Nachi itself needed to change and evolve, and because we're an important part of the sector, and we had a lot of work to do with our own internal administration and processes and reputation, and how we dealt with people as well. So I thought best to you shouldn't expect others to do what you can't do. So we thought we needed, and to the credit, many of the staff here have worked really hard on what I believe is now a much more professional organisation itself, and so that's a good message for the sector. Moving forward, I think we've still got some work to do with, as I mentioned before, the continuous improvement program, and that'll have a look at those. And out of that might come some changes to maybe some changes to the test or the format or how it's delivered, but that'll be determined when that work is complete. So we want to keep working on that. We want to keep working with governments and institutions to try and make more training pathways more effective and affordable for people. And that's, again, a lot of these solutions, they involve Nachi, but they're not things that Nachi can unilaterally do because we don't control everything. So collaboration and cooperation is really key in a sector that needs all the help it can get. So we'll be working, as I said, with governments and education providers about some of those policies. I think there are some real challenges to the sustainability of the profession, and access to reliable and quality, affordable training is one part of that. Remuneration is clearly another part of that, and I think there needs to be a look at some of the structural challenges in the sector to improve with that. Again, not something we can control, but I think raising them and talking them in the right forums can help. And some of the other structural things include policy levels, like making sure agencies support the certification system and keep working toward that consistency of having everyone certified, and also the way governments and agencies work on their procurement contracts to try and that's a two-edged sword. It's sort of having the rules in place, but also supporting the remuneration and some of the structural challenges. So they're industry-wide challenges. The ones for Nachi, I said, are more about us keeping up and adapting and improving our tests to meet the requirements. And that will continue to be looking at I guess, technology and digital opportunities to try and keep the cost of delivery, of creating and delivering and marking tests at a reasonable level, because we know it's a significant cost for people to enter the profession. But it's also, it's not it's an expensive exercise in terms of creating, delivering, marking and managing the system as well. So we've got to think about how we can make sure we minimize those that cost by being more efficient in how we do that.
And how it's all sustainable. And of course, speaking of education, you mentioned, for me, if in 5 years' time, people graduating from year 12 go, I want to be an interpreter, I want to be a translator, it's a great career path, then we'll know that we the structural changes you've talked about are working. Because I think at the moment, the picture is quite complex and quite murky in many different ways. So I think, there's a lot of effort through, everybody, I guess, but it does need to come together and become a career option for young people. And also, that comes with language learning and all kinds of things that we can somewhat influence, but, it's how our society here in Australia works as well. That's
and we hope that people, we want people to feel proud in the sector. One of the things that the pandemic and other disasters have had, it's certainly raised the profile in terms of Auslan interpreters. So that has been good in that way, but like I said, it needs to be attractive enough. Another key thing that is happening, and this helps with awareness as well, but one of the key pieces of work in the last few years that helped this, to some extent, the status of interpreters, is the recommended national standards for working with the interpreters in courts and tribunals. And the fact that the judiciary identifies interpreters as an officer of the court is a really significant step. We have just come to an arrangement with the Judicial Council on Cultural Diversity to do an update of those standards, and they'll be republished and re-promoted, particularly within the judiciary, because it's great to have them. But we do need to, the judiciary to take them on board as well. So that's an important piece of work that will be happening over the course of this year.
Okay, lots to do, lots to do. And one of the things we are doing is the forum. So we've got about 5 minutes, Mark, and quite a few questions. But I was going to ask you, so this is probably the 5th year in a row when Nachi is actually supporting the forum. And I don't think there are enough industry events or initiatives, and some of it is to do with COVID, of course, and there's not much we can do. But to have those challenging, those difficult, those tough conversations where we as an industry face some of the challenges, but more to the point, see what we can do about it. So tell me, why is Nachi involved in the forum? And for those of you that want to know, we'll put some information after the session's finished, but it is on the 31st of March, so this coming Wednesday at 9:30, and it'll be online. We and ahed about doing it face to face, but then we chickened out. We thought, nah, too fragile. So it'll be online. But why does Nachi? And I've noticed that you do support many industry events. Why do you do that? What's in it for you?
Yeah, thanks, Ava. Well, we just think it's really important that we are seen in the sector, but also seen to be supporting the industry. So yeah, and congratulations on the forum. It's been 5 or 6 years now. Obviously, last year when it was a bit of a challenge, but we've been there since the start, and I really congratulate Polaron and others for participating, because I think, like I said, it's a really good, exactly that, a forum to talk and discuss some of these issues. It doesn't mean we can fix them all quickly, but we have to be mature enough to put them there and discuss them and see what all the parties can do. And we're happy to continue to support that. And we support lots of other conference and, as I said, professional development events, just to try and, because we think in trying to professionalize the industry, these are sorts of things that are normalized in a profession. So it's important that by sponsoring, we make it a little more affordable for people to attend and participate.
Absolutely. And I think we all know what the issues are. How to fix them is another thing. So we're hoping that this forum will go a little way to, having this conversation and just seeing what is it that we, each of us can do in a practical sense every day to support the industry. And I think we have close to 350 people already attending, so that's a huge number, and the digital has enabled us to do that. We wouldn't be able to put a big event like that on, face to face. Stephanie, we have time for one question. Go for it.
Great. So why do you still see organisations using bilingual workers, for example, to translate things rather than using a Nachi certified translator? And what are the risks of not using a Nachi certified translator?
Yeah, thank you. I think that is unfortunate. Obviously, I mean, ideally, you'd have someone employed who's also a certified translator. There are certainly risks in that for the reasons I mentioned, that someone who is not with certification may have some skills, but they haven't been proven or tested. They may or may not be current, and certainly might, and not necessarily up to date. So I think, there are times when very short, small messages internally, and even for some reasons, for a few words, a Google Translate or something is fine. If you just wanted to order a meal at a restaurant, that's fine. But of course, the longer that sentence or paragraph becomes, the less effective those things are. So I think it's really important about horses for courses, or the right place at the right time. And the same goes with interpreting. A lot of people can talk a little bits and pieces of other languages, and that's great for a bit of conversation, but it's not so good when another individual is actually relying on it for very important services.
Mark, thank you very much for talking to us this morning. Have a safe trip. I know it's the first one in a while. As I said, airports are strange places at the moment, but we're very grateful for your time this morning and talking to us about Nachi, your role, the forum and everything else in between. So thank you so much. And we will see you hopefully face to face at some point soon.
Yeah, thank you.